Hi there, everybody. This is Ruth Edwards from Talent in Logistics. I'm the Business Development Director. Thank you for joining us today. I'm just going to wait a minute to see if any more of the registrants come through. The numbers are climbing each second, so we'll let that continue for a minute. Whilst we are waiting, thought I'd just run through some kind of niceties for today's webinar. So please, if you're having any technical issues at all, if you just pop that down, pop a comment down in the chat box, which is on your GoToWebinar dashboard. And if you just select that you want to send that just to staff rather than to the entire audience, then that will just come through to me and I can see if there's anything that we can do. Fingers crossed and touch wood, we haven't had problems in the other webinars we've ran, so hopefully that will all be okay. And also, please feel free to use the questions facility to ask any questions that you have throughout this webinar. If I get a chance, I'll try and look at them as we go to see if there's any that need answering while we go through. But if not, and if there's time at the end, then I'll be sure to answer some of those questions that do get asked, if we get any, that is. Okay, so I'm going to make a start. It looks like most people have joined us now, and we can obviously people might join as we go. So today's webinar is about creating a personal development plan. So I'm really glad that you've all been able to join us on this. I think it's an important conversation to have. But before we go into it in too much detail, I'm just going to let you know a little bit about Talent and Logistics in case this is your first interaction with us and you don't know much about who we are. So it gives you an idea of kind of where our experience comes from. So Talent and Logistics provides publications and services to the logistics sector through events, through research, through lots of different resources, and we're very dedicated to helping the logistics sector overcome any people and skills challenges that we have. So really focusing on people strategies, and we do that by working together really as a community. We've been running since 2017 and we hope to support both employees, employers and training providers within the sector to help them understand how to recruit, to develop, to engage and to retain the best people, whilst also addressing sector-wide skills challenges if we can. We run conferences, we run these webinars, which is a new thing since COVID. Obviously, we've had to adapt our offering to be much more digital. And we also host an annual awards night, which is coming up on the 1st of October, and again is going to be digital. And yeah, so basically, we just want to try and help the sector as much as we possibly can with those people strategies. So that's one of the reasons that we're running today's webinar. Now, I want to start off, if I can, by just launching a quick poll. Now, hopefully, this has come up on your screens now. So what I'm asking is, why have you joined this webinar today? So have you joined it to create your own personal development plan? Have you joined it to help with your team's development? Or have you joined it to use the ideas that we share within the wider business? Now, of course, you might want to answer those a few ways, but kind of the main priority of why you're on the call, and that might just help me as we go through. That will help me kind of position the way that I maybe talk about things a little bit, and maybe mention some extra little bits that I've got. So yeah, they're all. Oh, that's so funny. They're it's pretty much a 50-50 split. So we've had half of the registrants say it's to create their own personal development plan, which is great. And half the registrants have said to use these ideas within the wider business. So I'm sure there's people listening today that also want to use it to help with their team's development, but maybe that's not obviously top priority at the moment. And I suppose using it within the wider business kind of does kind of fill that gap too. But that's useful because I can make sure that I kind of tailor the content a little bit towards those two areas today. Okay, I'm just going to close that poll now. Thank you for doing that for me. Before I move on, I suppose the best place to start, if we look around these of kind of creating your own personal development plan or looking at it from the wider business, we can kind of why would you want to go about creating a personal development plan or making sure that that is part of the kind of objectives within your business? So I suppose personally, it's going to help you to have a vision for your future. So it's going to help you to identify the path that you need to follow in order to achieve your goals. And it can give your development a real purpose. So we're not just developing for development's sake, which I've known can happen in some organisations. It can help to create those small stepping stones towards your goals and towards achieving success. And it can also help to give that clear direction in times of uncertainty, and obviously that at the moment is quite relevant. I mean, I don't know, some people on this call, you know, they may well be furloughed, they may well have been recently made redundant, and so are, you know, really heavily thinking about new roles, new sectors, new opportunities that might be out there. Also within current businesses, things have changed so much, so dramatically, so it could have given that kind of different, you know, you've got this different view now of things. I know myself, you know, from a work-life balance point of view and having the children at home, and, you know, my work life has certainly changed, and possibly my priorities have changed slightly, and the way that I look at things. So, and I'm sure, you know, I'm not alone in that. I'm sure a lot of people are going through those same things. So it can help give that real clear direction if you put a personal development plan in place. And I've got to say, obviously, it's important when we start talking about this as we go through these slides, it's important to make sure that it is personal to you. As if it's a personal development plan that's created in conjunction with your business, I mean, sometimes they can be absolutely brilliant. I've done things in the past with previous employers where, you know, my personal development plans have been absolutely brilliant. But you've got to make sure that you make it personal to you, and you don't forget to put into it those things that you want to do, you know, such as maybe those out of role development goals, for example. So you might want to learn about a particular topic because it interests you and is a future career consideration for your progression, but your business might, for example, only want to support through relevant training to your current job or training that ensures compliance. So that, you know, I mean, it really does depend on who you're working for, on who your employer is. You know, some organisations embrace people development, you know, more than others, as is always the case. But yeah, it's making sure that it's very personal to you, your development plan. And then if I talk about from an internal point of view within an organisation, obviously the benefits there are around talent and succession planning, and of course development and training of your team members, and communication really that you do embrace that can really improve your employee engagement and your employee well-being as well. So, you know, you're showing them that they're worth investing in. But it's also, again, taking back to that other point about making it personal, you know, it is important as an employer, if you can, to make sure that they do have these personal development plans, because they own that. So, you know, it's putting it in their hands slightly. So yes, you're there to support them and you'll provide the guidance and the training that's necessary. But, you know, it's that sense of empowerment to be in control of your own development journey. And it's important for colleagues to understand that they play a vital part in that journey. And that they're not just going to be provided with everything on a plate, so to speak. You know, it creates much more of a learning culture within the organisation. So it's important, you know, to put that development in their own hands as much as possible as well. Okay, so this slide's a bit of a holder really, because I think I would have, a few years ago, I think I would have thought, right, let's get straight on to planning my personal development. Let's download a template off the internet or whatever. It's a personal development plan and let's start filling it in. that was the way I'd always have done it in the past. You know, it's only over the last couple of years that I've realised that might not be the best place to start. And so what I want to say at this point is, you know, hit the pause button, take a step back, and let's do some self-reflection. If you just download a personal development plan template and start filling it in, it's not going to be as effective. And, you know, it's going to make the process a lot harder if you just start from there, rather than what I'm going to suggest now and what I'm going to work through now with you is taking that step back and doing some self-reflection and some self-assessment. I think that's probably the most important place to start if you can. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk through is about answering these following questions. Now, I will provide all of this post, all of these details post webinar. So feel free to obviously take notes, but you don't have to at all. So the first thing I'm going to ask people to do is answer these questions. So this is going to help you determine where you are currently, identify where you want to go, and also identify what you need to do in order to achieve your goals. So the first bit is to look at, what do you like doing? Which tasks do you enjoy the most? And what keeps you motivated at work? You know, there's always going to be tasks that you prefer to do than others, but if you're thinking of a career change or a job role move, then maybe this needs to be an area that you do focus in on, you know, so you feel more fulfilled and more happy with the role that you're going to try and get to, or to try and do in the future. You've also got the, you know, what do you dislike doing? You know, there's always, like I said, going to be things that you're not keen on, but it's important to identify those. So is there anything at work that particularly demotivates you? Are there things that you wish you didn't have to do? There are things that, you know, I do in my job. I hate spreadsheets, for example. I hate spreadsheets. So anything that I could do that involves less spreadsheets, I would be more than happy with. So yeah, it's important to identify those things that you don't like doing. Looking at your strengths and looking at your weaknesses, or identifying areas for development, might be a better way to term that. So yeah, what do you do well? What are you good at? What have you been developing of late? What could you maybe do a little bit better? What knowledge and skills do you need to develop? You know, there's always a case to improve your weaknesses, but I would suggest that it's also very important to look at those strengths and to see if maybe, as part of your development plan, part of your strategy is to maximise on those strengths, you know, to get even better at them, to become an expert. Maybe that's what you need to focus in on. Quite often we just focus, I suppose, on getting those weaknesses better, but that doesn't always have to be the case. You can look at improving those strengths as well. And then you've got, what do you want to achieve? So I suppose, how are things now and how do you want them to be different? You know, how do you want your job to develop? Do you want your job to develop, or do you want it to be something else entirely? And really, you know, honing in on whether you are motivated enough to achieve those goals at the moment, and if not, what you need to do in order to make that a reality, is something really important. You know, and identifying, you know, what you want to achieve, and also how you're going to measure that success. So how are you going to know when you've made that progress? What's going to be different about what you're doing and how you're acting, and, you know, how your role's going if you make this change, and identifying, you know, how your performance should improve, but also, you know, from a business-wide sector factor, how that performance improvement is going to help the business, you know, achieve their objectives, maybe, is an important thing to make sure that you're focused on. And then there's the, how are you viewed by others? So you could list this out I suppose, around improving the relationships with your key stakeholders, so employees, customers, sector peers, your line management team, more centralised services such as project management teams or HR maybe, senior leaders within the business, you know, thinking about your own brand. Is that part of your personal development? Is that an area that you need to focus in on? And we'll go into that quite a bit more. I'm going to talk about kind of how others view you and getting some feedback on some later slides. So those questions that you've asked are going to give you a really good starting point. And then I want to introduce you now to something that I only actually discovered probably a couple of months ago. Now, it's called the Johari Window, and it's a brilliant model created by psychologists Lufton Ingham, in 1955. So it's going back a fair bit, but it's a very well known and popular model, particularly used in the world of HR. And what we've got here is we've got a kind of 4-box kind of template with 2 axes, I suppose. So there's the area of down on the vertical line of what is known to others, and then along the horizontal line of what is known to yourself. And then you've got these 4 clear, distinct boxes. So the first one is the arena. So the arena is what people can easily see about you and what you are likely to share about yourself. So for example, you know, you might be really good at networking, and everyone can see that in you, and you know it yourself. You know, that could be something that is a skill that you have. It might be that you've got a real good technical understanding of the business, and everybody knows that, and you do too. So there's the arena. You also have the facade down at the bottom. So this is, you know, known to yourself but not known to others. So things that you maybe don't disclose too much. So you might have a little, you know, a skill that you're good at, and you're kind of keeping that to yourself a little bit and not sharing it. So there's the facade. You've also got the unknown area. And this is a difficult one, really, because it's not known to you and it's not known to others. So that's quite an interesting area to start thinking about. And then you've got blind spot. So this is things that others can see in you, but you're not aware of yourself. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in that in a few moments. So the aim within this model, if you're going to look at this, using this model as part of your personal development, is to try and get as many things as possible into the arena. So get them up into that top box. So for facade, maybe a little disclosure is needed. You know, you might have not shared the skills in an area because you didn't think they were relevant, or maybe you were concerned about what sharing might mean. But if you want to develop, obviously it's a really good idea to get those things out there. For the unknown, maybe a journey of self-discovery is needed, having a little look at yourself, and then that might then move it over into the facade box, and then once you make others aware of it too, it can then itself move up into the arena. And then there's the blind spot. And so for this, you know, if you want to get these things into the arena so that you know about them as well, you need to ask for feedback, which is what we're going to go into and discuss now as part of a 360-degree feedback tool. So what I mean by this is by asking your stakeholders for some feedback about yourself. So, for example, if you think an area you might want to go into is, I don't know, maybe a certain middle management role within your organisation, there might be key skills that are needed in order to do that. So maybe you could ask how they think you are with those skills. So you could ask people, you know, how am I around delegation? You know, do you think I've got strong skills in terms of time management, communications? maybe you've got an appraisal coming up and you want to see how people think you are performing against certain business objectives. So you could ask people questions around your customer service, you know, how you communicate change, how you work as part of a team. So normally what this would be is some kind of survey, or, you know, an email that you send out to people and ask them to provide feedback. And you could send this to senior leadership, to the people that report into you. If you're a manager, you could ask your line managers themselves, your peers, you know, ask people that are on the same level as you as well for their feedback, and others, like I said, people from within more centralized roles that you maybe get some exposure to within the business. And I've got a few pointers on here to kind of talk to you about. So don't, when you're creating a 360-degree feedback, try not to make it too time consuming with loads of questions for people to fill in, because this can obviously take time to complete. So you know, limit it to just a few questions, and make sure you set a deadline as well. You know, people are busy and they need to understand what sort of priority this is within their to-do list. So yeah, so I'd start with that. I'd also make sure that your questions are written in a structured way, and I would do this to ensure that you are getting obviously the responses, you know, in the way that you kind of need them to come through for your development planning. Ensuring that you differ the questions if needed based on who they're being sent to. So you might ask your senior leadership team, for example, some different questions to what you would send to the people that report into you, because you deal with them in very different ways, and on different subjects, and have more or less interaction with these people. So it could be a good idea to maybe alter the questions slightly based on what you need from them. Seems an obvious one, but asking people to be honest, and that leads on nicely to the next point, really. So try and make it anonymous if you can. So assure you know, that if you can do a Survey Monkey, for example, free to use, nice and simple to set up, and you can send that out, and you don't ask for people's names, and you just get that back in without knowing who it's come from. Now obviously you might only be sending this to 10 people, and so it could be really obvious who the answers are coming from. So also when you're asking for this feedback, assuring people that if you figure out it was them, you're not going to let it affect your relationship, is a important thing to do. You know, we need to deal with this, I suppose, with a certain level of maturity, and so making sure that if someone is honest with you, as you've asked them to be, that you don't then personally kind of take that out on them if you don't quite get the answers that you were looking for. You know, after all, this is about kind of self-awareness and revealing that blind spot. So you could get some things back that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So making sure that doesn't damage any relationships is very important. And then, as I mentioned earlier, probably linking those questions to certain objectives, to projects, to key soft skills, kind of gives it that key kind of direction around what you're doing. So I've done these in the past. I did one recently with the business that I work within, and to be honest, I was quite purposely, I sent it. It was I asked people to be honest. I said I'm not going to get offended by any responses, but I didn't make it anonymous. I sent it out, and so people would have just on an email, so people would have just emailed me directly, and I suppose my questioning was quite open, was quite woolly in terms of what I was asking, and I literally got a couple of responses, and I was interested to see whether that would be the case, because I've also in the past sent out an anonymous Survey Monkey with some real clear directed questions, you know, and I differentiated them between the people that I was sending them to, and I would say I probably got about 90% response rate, and I sent it to about 25-30 people within the business I was working in at the time. So using this feedback that I've provided here and making sure that if you're going to go out and ask for feedback, that you do it the right way is vitally important based on the questions you're going to get. A final couple of points on this slide is you might want to check with management that they're comfortable with this being done. Generally, in my experience, it's always been received well, but make sure that you explain why you want to do it, what business problem you're maybe trying to achieve by doing this. You know, if it's improving your skills and competencies, then there's going to be advantages to the business, I'm sure. Why you need to do this right now, why is it a priority, and what outcomes are you trying to achieve? So if management understand that and understand that it's, you know, it's being done for a serious reason, then I'm sure they'd be happy to support. And then for the companies on this webinar who are looking from a wider team and business point of view, this is a great thing to implement as well within the organisation, to do these 360-degree feedbacks, you know, maybe as part of your appraisal process, to create that culture of honest feedback and culture of personal development, you know, being in the hands of the individual. So I would say that some rules need to be communicated in relation to the level of maturity that this should be treated with, as I mentioned before, and maybe provided with some guidance on how to give constructive feedback. But if you do this, then you know, if you give that kind of, you know, that guidance and those rules, then it should kind of be implemented really well and should be great for your learning development culture. Okay, moving on now to a little bit more, we've done those questions about yourself, we've then probably done a 360 review and got some feedback from others, so you can now start to do some further analysis. And I think a really good place to start is with a SWOT analysis. So when I first saw this method a few years ago, I was surprised, as I'd always linked a SWOT analysis to business strategies and business plans, you know, never to an individual, and, you know, never in relation to personal development, but it does actually work really well. And for those that aren't aware, it's S is for strengths, W is for weaknesses, O is for opportunities, and T is for threats. And by now, doing the questions that you've done and doing the 360 feedback, you should have identified your strengths and weaknesses. So this should be fairly simple to fill in. You know, it's those kind of, what do you do well? What skills do you have? What do other people see as your strengths? And then the same sort of stuff for weaknesses. But the more challenging part to fill in sometimes can be the opportunities and threat side. So just to talk you through those a little more. So from an opportunities point of view, this is going to help you identify what is out there for you to go for. So what trends are out there that you could take advantage of, what's going on that you can capitalize on. You know, for example, let's take from a logistics world point of view, you know, there's the human element side of things that's happening at the moment around coronavirus, and that, you know, people understanding how important people are within our organisations. And, you know, so maybe there's an opportunity there, if you love working with people, to get more involved in maybe the HR side of things. Conversely, obviously within our sector, there's a lot of development in terms of technology around automation and IT, and so maybe that's an area that you could explore. What about something to do with environmental and sustainability? That's obviously really a hot topic at the moment, and I think forever will be. So, you know, what opportunities are out there that you could kind of maximise on when you're looking at kind of opportunities for development? And then you've got threats. So this is really important. What could happen if you don't maximise on those strengths, if you don't improve those weaknesses, and if you don't grab hold of those opportunities? What's coming up that could put blockers in the way? Having your eye on these sorts of things and keeping those in mind can really help to kind of motivate and push you to continually develop. It's really important to identify what threats are potentially out there. So that's a good place to start. And then I've got this. So this is something that, you know, I've not really ever seen anywhere else before, but it was something I did myself. So you know, today's webinar for me was about providing as many examples as possible. So, you know, to try and help with what works best for you. So please don't feel like you've got to go away and do all of the questions, the 360, the SWOT, you know, this development circle, you know, everything all together. You know, pick the bits that are right and relevant and useful for yourself. But this is a way that I mapped out my development in the past, and it was a really good visual way to kind of put things into boxes, I suppose, for myself. So what I did is I listed down, I answered all those questions that I asked at the beginning, and I listed down from that all of my areas of development on a piece of paper. And it was quite easy to see when I started looking at that they grouped into 4 clear areas. So the areas that I used in my example, so were my personal character, my profile, my knowledge, and my skills. So I could very quickly see by putting all these bits on a piece of paper that they kind of fit into these 4 boxes. Now, it is important to say you might not have 4 boxes, you might have 6 boxes, you might have 2, but you could still obviously turn it into this development circle. What I've also done in the past, to give you a bit of variety, is I've covered it off into different areas. So with my teams, I used the 4 Ps. So I looked at people, I looked at process, I looked at platforms, so around software and systems, and I looked at performance, so around KPIs and objectives. So that could be a way that you do this. So once you've got those development areas and you've created this circle, we can very quickly then start to see that you have got these areas. So for example, for me, for personal development, at the time, I knew that the areas for my development were confidence, were communicating upwards, and were resilience. So those were 3 areas that I really needed to work on. And then what I could do then is I could start to identify some tasks that I would need to do in order to improve in those areas. So for example, I might need to go on some resilience training. So now we're starting to get to the area where we can actually develop a plan. Now, self-reflection is obviously, here we go, I'm just going to pop this onto here. So our goals can only be reached through the vehicle of a plan. There is no other route to success. So we have got to get onto a plan at some point. It's important to say, obviously, you've got to do that self-reflection piece. You know, receiving feedback and evaluation and discussing the outcomes from your self-assessment are really important. But now creating a plan, that's what's going to help you obviously ultimately get that next job or get that promotion. But you know, it is vitally important. I just want to say it one more time. It's hard to create a proper plan without doing those self-assessment stages first. Okay, so what I've got now is I've got 3 different examples of personal development plans that you can use. And these will all be included in the pack that I send you afterwards. And this first one that I've created is really simple, really nice and simple. So we can use this perfectly to kind of create a plan. So it just covers off, what do you want to achieve? So bringing it back to you and your desired achievements and why you want to do it, why you want to develop. And then detailing the action that needs to be taken and how you're going to measure that success. So maybe maybe here actually it would be a good idea from an action plan point of view to think of a few ways to achieve your goal and then decide which is the best course of action. So for example, if I wanted to I don't know, improve my areas around recruitment law, let's say, as an example, if we're talking, let's say, around HR, if we wanted to do that. Now I could do a few things. I could read notes from a recruitment law website, where they've got some kind of blogs or articles that I could look at. I could speak to someone from within the HR team to ask for some guidance. I could go on a course to help me, and then maybe I could look at those 3 different options and go, do you know what, this option is great, it's really accessible, it's cheap, I can do it at my own time, but you know, it doesn't allow me to kind of get any feedback, or, you know, it's not kind of a two-way conversation, or, you know, a course, whilst it's harder to maybe get to and a little more expensive, I know that it's going to be really structured and give me kind of, you know, live case studies and examples, and I could maybe get a certificate at the end, which would be great for my CV. So you could map down a few options for your actions, and then decide which is the best one to follow. That's probably a good idea, and something that I've done in the past. And then you need to detail the timescales for completion. So, you know, making sure that you've got that goal of when you want to achieve it by, and also detailing any support that you might need from management or for peers. And obviously, if you build this into conversation that you have with your management, it will then show them as well the support that you need in order to achieve those goals. And then finally, you know, identifying what the next steps are going to be from that. So maybe this plan is going to have step 1 of what you need to do to achieve your goals, and you then want to list out, you know, what the next steps need to be. And finally, whether or not you've achieved it. So, you know, it is worth saying that these plans need to be very fluid, they need to be constantly updated, and they may need to change as priorities change and, you know, life happens. But, you know, it is worth kind of, I always like ticking something off a to-do list. So putting down whether you've achieved it or not, you know, is important. And if you haven't, maybe you could detail why, and so what you've done instead of that, because like we've said, priorities change. And the final point really to mention on this personal development plan, and for any personal development plan you create, is please make sure that you keep them SMART. So by SMART, I mean specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. If you stick within those parameters, then you'll have a really good personal development plan to use. Okay. This is another example of a personal development plan, and this one is more time specific. So you could, I've bulked these as an example into 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12, beyond 12 months, and then, you know, real long-term goals. So you could almost base it on short, medium, and long-term goals. So do you need to strengthen certain skills that you already possess short-term wise, you know, some quick wins? Can you, you know, in the short term, can you develop a new skill in order to achieve an objective that's coming up really soon? You know, now that you've identified your strengths and weaknesses, are there any behaviours that you need to quite quickly work on? Or are there any immediate expectations from the leadership team that need to be addressed? From a medium-term point of view, are there any items that you need to keep up to date with that are critical to your role, but you know they're coming up? So, for example, regular CPD as part of a professional or technical role. So, you know, maybe you know you've got your renewal for first aid training, or you've got driver CPC deadlines approaching. You know, these things that are going to come up as part of your development constantly. Are there things such as software, a new software rollout happening in 6 months' time? And so that's part of your medium-term goals, is to start understanding and working through that. Is there some new equipment being introduced to the business? Or maybe you're working towards some form of accreditation or membership of a professional body such as the CILT. You know, those could all form part of this. And then you've got your long-term goals. So you may have aspirations to progress your career and move across a department. You may want to move into a managerial role, or maybe you've decided that the time is right to look for a completely different role or business to work within. So now is a good time, I would suggest, to maybe start to identify what skills might be needed, and to start to think about those longer term goals for yourself. So this can be a really good way to kind of keep those development goals, you know, time related and time specific. And then this is the final template of personal development plans that you could use. And this is one that I think for the 50% of people today that we're here from a wider business point of view, this is a kind of really good way to lay those out. Is I've done this as part of, maybe you could use it as part of an internal appraisal process within the business that links to customer objectives, and the development that's needed by individuals in order to excel in those areas, and ultimately obviously to achieve business success. So, you know, are there any gaps in your primary role that could have been identified through quality checks? You know, is something that could be put down in that primary function box. You've got customer service, you know, is there any feedback that's been provided there? Operational effectiveness, financials, the company vision, how can you kind of develop in order to achieve goals in that area? Things around teamwork, innovation, involvement in the community, and of course, as should always be the case, there is that box there that is around personal development, so things that are key, and, you know, your own ambitions and skills that you want to attain. And something I really like about this template and this version of a plan is that it's got that bit at the bottom around accountability, following up and coaching, which takes us quite nicely really onto the final slide of today's webinar, which is around continuous professional development. So, as I mentioned earlier, you can't create a plan without first doing a self-assessment. In my book, that's what, you know, it's my opinion. People do, people can, but I think it's not as effective if you don't do that self-assessment piece. But then also, the plan is going to be absolutely no good at all if we don't follow it up. You know, if we don't have support and if we don't self-reflect on what we've done. So I've researched a lot with this CIPD and from a HR point of view, and looked at continuous professional development a lot as part of my role now and previous roles. And, you know, and they've kind of got lots of, you know, it might be useful for you to look, you know, they've got lots of information around continuous professional development, but it's so important to reflect upon your learning experience. So remembering, so yes, listing down what you did, but remembering why you did it, putting it back into context of why you wanted to do that, putting down what you've learned, maybe putting down what you didn't, you know, you thought you'd learned but you didn't, and maybe that might identify some kind of areas for where you might need to go to next. And also thinking about how you will use this in your future roles or your current role, and maybe reflecting also on how you have already started using it, and show you can kind of showcase those benefits that you're already getting out of the learning that you've done. And you could put this into some form of template that accompanies your development plan. So you could have like almost a reflective log that sits side by side, so you can kind of always do that self-reflection piece. Is such a good idea. You know, measuring that overall impact that your learning has had on you and on your workplace is so vitally important. And what this can also do by doing this reflection is it can almost take you back round, almost in a cycle, to that self-assessment piece again, and you almost start it again, and then you'll start to adapt and evolve your plan, and keeping on going through that cycle is really, you know, a great place to to kind of to start and to make sure it's continuous. And that's it from me. So we are pretty much on bang on time in terms of today's webinar. I haven't had any questions come through, which is, I think, hopefully a good sign. People have had the answers to the questions that they've needed to be asked today. I will wait a second and just talk for one more minute to see if any do come through. Now, it is important to say that a lot of the templates and things that I've used today are part of a pack that I'm going to send through to you, and I'll also send through a copy of the slides as well, so that you can use these for yourself to start that development plan, and also obviously the wider business strategies as well. The pack that I send out does have some kind of downloadable plain versions of the documents that you can use. We'll also create a blog from today's content, so if you haven't had a chance to make many notes, please do look out for that, because that will give you some of the written content from today's webinar. And finally, whilst I've got you on this call, obviously, like I said, talent and logistics is all about improving people's strategies and helping the sector. I want to just draw your attention to an annual conference that we've got going on in September on the 23rd. And that focuses on how to engage with employees to increase their productivity, how we can reduce staff turnover and improve absence and safety incident rates by just making sure that our focus is on our people. So if you're interested in attending that or finding out more, then please do just get in touch with the details on the screen, and I'll also include a link to that event as well in the post webinar email that I send out, so that you can take a look. But for now, that's it from me. So thank you very much for attending, all of you, and I will speak to you soon.